Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Peterpodcast. I'm your host, reporter Taylor Clydesdale, and with me this week from the newsroom is Mike Lacey, and joining us this week is our guest, Mayor Daryl Bennett. Daryl is running for his third term as the city's mayor, and today we're going to be talking about transportation.
I don't see car travel changing a great deal in this community because of its nature. 92% of the people outside the city and the county travel by car to come in and out of their day-to-day activities. 85%, I think it is, of travel within the city is done by cars. The car itself will change. The car itself will change from its normal internal combustion engine to electric and hybrid combinations that are going to make travel somewhat less difficult on the environment going forward, and looking forward to those days occurring. That's coming faster than people think.
And we're also going to be talking about various other issues, including the PDI sale. We're going to be talking about housing development, including the intensification of key areas and the building of subdivisions. So, hope you enjoy the show.
Well, it's wonderful to be here today in the presence of two esteemed journalists in the city of Peterborough. Daryl Bennett, running for third term as mayor of the city of Peterborough, and I'm privileged to be here speaking with you. Thank you for setting up the venue for it.
Oh, no problem. We're proud to set up our little corner here for you today.
Yeah, and it's a nice little corner.
It is. Yeah, so why don't you let us know a little bit about why you're running for a third term here in Peterborough?
Well, the city of Peterborough, as you may know, is near and dear to me from many aspects, and it presents lots of opportunities and lots of challenges. So I started the election process back in 2010 with a very simple slogan, that's with leadership that works, and then in 2014 we moved into purpose and progress, and in 2018 we're moving forward with momentum. We have a lot of good things that are going on in the community right now, and a lot of things that we'll take some careful attention to make sure they all come to fruition as best we can. So that's the primary reason, other than I do love this community and everything that it stands for. So the community in many ways speaks to the basic values that I use in my own life and in my own business, and we have lots of things to be very thankful for and very hopeful for as this future unfolds. You're going to see some growth that occurs here in this city that will be unparalleled in many ways to what's happened in the past, and it's going to take some careful consideration to make sure that we get it right.
So what are some of the things that aren't finished yet that you'd like to be around for?
Growth opportunities from the businesses that will grow jobs in the community. We have 3 or 4 very serious contenders that have been around now for one of them over 2 years, one of them over a year, and the other one is fairly new to the scene. But each and every one of those, if we can latch on to all of them, we will be in marvelous shape job-wise for a considerable period of time. If we only get one of them, we'll replace all the workers that have disappeared through the manufacturing sector over the last couple of years. So, and that includes the unfortunate GE closure as well. So it's been something that we took a keen interest in when GE announced its closing. We've been working with all the departments to make sure that we give it our best shot to replace those workers.
And, speaking with people who are around my age, the age where people they're graduating from Trent and Fleming, they're just trying to get into their first jobs and their new careers. And the number one thing that I hear from people who don't want to stay in Peterborough is that there's nowhere to live, there's few apartments, there's few houses, and there's few jobs. So how do we go about tackling that issue so that these young, educated individuals want to stay in our community?
Sure. And we tackle that on a day-by-day basis, and we've stated it numerous times. We create the environment for jobs to be created. If we create jobs with the city itself, that costs people money. So I think we've done a pretty reasonable job of that when you consider the job stats figures that we've been following for the last number of courses with StatsCan. How do we go about promoting the city as a place to live? That too speaks volumes of where we are with the vacancy rates. We are very tight right now, and that's why it's important for us to look at each and every application that comes forward that's going to provide new housing for the community. So pricing of housing has risen because of supply and demand. We can help to correct that by getting some of the new projects, i.e. the subdivision activity that's going on, approved. as well as some intensification downtown, and those are two things that I'm very, very high on.
Yeah, and we were just talking a little bit about the new subdivision that did receive initial approval the other night at council, the Ashborough Village
And to be
one.
very clear, that's a draft subdivision agreement with 67 or 68 conditions on it that we've imposed to ensure that we get it right, or as close to right as we possibly can.
So when would that come online? Like if it went ahead?
If it's approved in September, then it will be back in front of council probably the second quarter of next year to tell us where it stands by way of conditions. Some of the conditions are going to be quite onerous, not the least of which is the traffic consideration that is near and dear to a lot of people. It's one that has needed to be done for a long time. I grew up in East City, and there was concerns about people on the other side of the water back in those days.
I live on the other side of the water.
Ah, there we go. Now, all that said, you still have to be able to invoke changes that are going to be meaningful. So we fix the bridge going across at Mariah, or we fix the bridge at McFarland, then what do?
Yeah.
You're going to run into the same problem at the bridge going across the river at Hunter Street. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to be brought into play, and that's why you get the experts in to tell you what's the best way to approach it.
And you do have people who have concerns about traffic, about the about flooding in that area, and my response to some of that is not all of those studies and not all of those considerations are going to be done at once ahead of time. They're studies that are done at various stages along that project's lifetime.
Draft plans of subdivision are exactly that. You're going to work on all of the considerations and all of the conditions that are imposed to make sure that you clean up as many as you can. The flooding side of it is one that has been there and will continue to be there for some time. We'll mitigate a fair bit of it with the new lands that will be acquired by the city, so that we can then take over and act as a mitigator for the actual flood conditions that are north. First of all, they're on site and they're north of the site. We can pretty much, as you can read it on the papers, you can pretty much eliminate all the flooding that's north of there. The flooding south of there is caused primarily by the railroad tracks going through. That's been there for a long time, and it creates a bit of a dam for those properties. So we have to slow down the flow of water as much as we can to make sure that it has a chance to get away rather than just building up in that area.
So how do you assure people who do have those concerns that those are problems that are going to be dealt with?
Well, it's all in the literature. If people read the report, you'll find that it's pretty much defined, and the processes are all certainly clearly defined within the report. The conditions are all written out, and they're all meaningful, and they're all ones that we have to clear before we can afford final approval of that subdivision.
Now, in the case of housing, when you have draft subdivision plans like this, other plans in the works, those are kind of long-term solutions to the current housing crisis we're
medium
facing.
and long-term.
Are there some short-term solutions? Because
secondary suite activity has started to take hold, and that will offer up some great
that's the basement
solutions.
apartments.
Basement apartments, laneway activities where you might have a garage that's available to be converted to a secondary suite. Rooms within the houses can be converted as well. It's pretty all-encompassing as far as opening up different avenues for people to, number one, pick up some extra income, but number two, offset some of the shortfalls.
Because I can see when the 407 was finished,
Look out.
this is going to be a very enticing community for people to.
This will be a great spot, and it won't be people who are just here to retire. It'll be people who are using this as a community of lifestyle. That I'm finding the folks that I talk to now that have moved in the last couple of terms of council are more than pleased with what they found here, and they're excited to tell other people about it. So that's.
But that also does put a pressure on housing prices.
Yes, it does.
As the market heats up.
And I was going to, springboard off that, but the 407 is coming, and when it connects, that's going to be a huge opportunity for growth in our community, for people who do want to live here. How do we ensure that we're going to be ready for those people, that we have the houses, that we have the jobs, so that people do want to come here and spend their money and
Sure, great comment, and certainly one that is not lost on we at the city or we at council who deal with that type of stuff. We have approved every subdivision application that's come forward based on what we believe to be expert opinion on what will happen when the 407 comes through. Now, the development community are the final folks who want to spend their money to do the developments, and they're all showing a great comfort with the decisions they've made to make that investment. So probably 3,500 with this new subdivision, 35 to 4,000 homes will be rolling through the system over this next term of council, in my estimation, which will go a long ways to alleviate some of the difficulties.
You know, the concern from some over that is that the city is basically is building a city that's sprawling out and becomes much more car dependent, where they think the focus should be on intensification within the current borders.
The argument there is, well, we are within the boundaries of the city now.
Yeah.
The lands that are being built on now were lands that were set aside for development over the years, and it's just now it's their time to come forward. The argument about the car disappearing, I think, is one that's going to take some serious debate going forward. I don't see car travel changing a great deal in this community because of its nature. 92% of the people outside the city and the county travel by car to come in and out of their day-to-day activities. 85%, I think it is, of travel within the city is done by cars. The car itself will change. The car itself will change from its normal internal combustion engine to electric and hybrid combinations that are going to make travel somewhat less difficult on the environment going forward, and I'm looking forward to those days occurring. That's coming faster than people think, and I think that's and it leads into one of the other questions that are out there is, why did you ever get rid of that PDI? What a wonderful little company you had there. Why would you divorce
We were going to
yourself?
get to that.
Well, let's get to it.
Yeah.
I have no difficulty talking about that one at all. As you know, I was on board with the sale of it for all the right reasons. Read all the reports that are out there and read yourself into the changes that are occurring in that industry, and it's a pretty logical decision. On top of that, it gives you the funds that can be reinvested from the sale of that to offset some of the deficiency in the capital projects in the city of Peterborough, which presently in 2018, I think it's $1.98 billion of outstanding capital projects, and this the money, reinvestment of the PDI money and the money from the casino goes a long way to start offsetting some of those costs instead of doing it on the backs of the taxpayer.
Now, I know there are some people who are afraid that now that Hydro One would be responsible for people's hydro bills, and especially at that kind of 11th year mark where the rates are no longer frozen or kept to the rate of inflation, they're afraid that at that 11th year, Hydro One would jack up everyone's rates. Can you address that?
Sure, we can address that by looking at what's already going on within the area. The areas within the city right now are in a Hydro One territory. Simon subdivision up through that area, the new subdivision on Park Hill, is already in H1 territory. All the new subdivisions in the city of Peterborough are in H1 territory. We lost our ability to grow the footprint to allow us to offset those known costs that are coming down the pike. So we've got anything that we would have done through PDI would have been on the backs of the existing ratepayers rather than on the backs of the entire community.
So PDI couldn't expand?
PDI was limited on that expansion.
Okay.
Right. We touched up against Hydro One territory when we hit Park Hill Road, and when we hit anything north of there now, it's all H1.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So if you look at the cost factor, people will find that the H1 costs for urban type activities is very, very similar to our own. Their ability to offset the known factors that are going to come forward. Terrorist activity in Europe now is very prevalent as it relates to I was going to use the word gangsters, so I will use the word gangsters, hacking into public services and taking over and demanding money to get them off the system, and they've been very successful at it. So the cost of setting up a system that is hacker-proof is very, very onerous. H1 already has it in their system. The cost of switchgear changes, the new stuff that's coming in, very onerous for a 38,000 rate base as opposed to 1.3 million rate base. So you can do the math. If you've got to spend $8 million or $10 million to upgrade your system, you can spread that over 1.3 million customers a lot easier than you can spread it over 38,000.
Now, did we have to update the system to be hacker-proof?
Yeah, we were.
Are we mandated to? Or?
Provincial government was instructing us to get ourselves ready for it. If we don't meet a certain level and certain timelines in their estimation, then they will step in and assist us with getting it done.
What a time we live in, eh?
It's-
We have
What
to
a
make
time
sure our
we live
hydro
in.
infrastructure is
I've said
hack-proof.
it before that we are puppets for the upper levels of government in many ways, and we have, go back to the subdivision. If we don't approve it, defer it, or defeat it, it goes to the new OMB body, and they will, as long as the guidelines that are mandated by the province are followed, then they'll just rubber stamp it. And you may lose all the conditions you have.
I am wondering though, I think it's more of a philosophical question. When you, on one hand, you're elected to make decisions on behalf of the people of Peterborough.
Correct.
But on the other hand, you also want to be responsive to the needs of the community at the moment. And when you have an issue such as PDI, where there seems to be such strong reaction towards selling it, does part of you,
Well, there's strong.
do you weigh that? Like, how do you factor that into your decision?
Pretty well every decision you make has naysayers and pros and cons to it.
PDI, I would say more than others, though.
Actually, you'd be surprised the number of people who I would suggest there's as many in favor of the sale as there was against the sale.
Oh, okay.
And
You'd
the
say just
ones
quieter?
who were just the ones who expect us to read the reports, do our due diligence, and make the right decisions on behalf of the community.
Yeah.
People who were initially concerned about the sale going through is you're going to lose. You're going to turn over to a private company our poles and wires. Yep, you're right. And they'll do a much better job of maintaining the service at the levels that we've grown accustomed to and the pricing that we've grown accustomed to than we can. If it stays in PDI's hands, we had projected our rates would go up 28.8% over the next 10 years. Hydro's rates will be in the 6.5% range, and then beyond that, we've got some preliminary indications that if OEB approves on the basis that we believe they will, people will be very pleased with the overall outcome.
Now, another thing that I hear from people is that, okay, so we were in a situation where we should have been selling PDI. What if there were more offers on the table? And the example that people give is Viridian, who had made some comments that they were considering being in on negotiations as well for the purchase of PDI.
And Viridian showed up and were more than pleased to sit down and chat with us, but when we were asked publicly, do you have enough money to buy us? And they said, no, we don't have that type of money. They were looking at an amalgamation of some sorts to try to build themselves up to the 350,000 customer level, which is what's deemed to be appropriate for new operations going forward. I don't believe they'll ever make that number, quite frankly, so you would become a part of their amalgamation considerations and part of their sale considerations going forward. We had outside experts look at what we were doing, how we were doing it, what our pricing points were, and we have retained probably 99.8% of full value out of what we're selling, if not more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So some members of the public say that the Viridian option wasn't considered. You're saying that it was considered, but it was found not to be
as overall process and found to be very shortcoming.
Okay. I think that's a great spot where we're going to take a short break, come back into it, and talk about a few more topics. Does that sound good with you guys?
Wonderful, yes.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Then we'll be right back.
Okay.
All right.
Anyway, we're live.
Yeah, we are live. So
Welcome back.
Welcome
Great
back.
break. I have a nice glass of cool water in my you don't know the power of the dark side mug.
yes. Well, we're back on, and we're going to be talking a little bit about. Let's go into transportation right now, particularly where we are with the Parkway.
Actually, I'm gonna.
You're going to veto that?
No, I want to talk about the Parkway, but I'm wondering. The Parkway's been, 60 years now we've been debating it?
Oh, how about 1 year before I was born? How about 71 years ago
years.
when it first came forward, 1947. Yeah,
So
right.
why not say we're not going to do the Parkway, and we're going to do a study and try to find whatever it would take to replace the traffic that would
We've
handle.
already done those studies,
Yeah.
actually, and we can do a number of attempts at building a solution to the long-term needs for the transportation of this community. And you've got one choice was the Parkway corridor, utilizing that with a 2-lane arterial street and a bridge going over the park, and that was in 2014 dollars, just around $80 million to do that. At the same time, we did alternate solutions to it and said, okay, what if we can't do that how do we go about making things work because of the known growth patterns that are going to occur, what we feel are the known growth patterns that are going to occur. And that solution costs out at $109 million in 2014 dollars. But the difficulty with that one, when full growth occurs, those fail. And now you got to go back and look at a solution to transportation for the overall community, which you already turned down because the Parkway was that solution and continues to be that solution. People have chastised, berated us on occasion by saying, you're not looking at the overall picture. Look at all these studies that have been done, and everything has occurred in spite of not having the Parkway. All the professionals have come in and said, okay, we take into consideration that your long-term planning includes that Parkway corridor. Therefore, our results are based on that happening at some point in time, and everything we're telling you to do now will assist what your problem is now, but long-term, you're going to have to come up with a different solution. And that's all in the report from all every...
No, I'm just wondering, but we continue to have the same debate. It's like Groundhog Day in Peterborough, right? Over the Parkway.
Yeah, we actually...
And nothing gets, on that front, gets done.
The interesting part of the EA process is that it's almost designed for failure in some regards because it leaves you open to all the changes in the legislation over the years. So when the Parkway was first considered, it was, a $6 million project that would have been paid 50-50 by the city and the government. Changing that up to an $80 million project just to finish what's not been done thus far, plus all the studies that you have to do in the interim. So from an operational standpoint, transportation-wise, the Parkway corridor usage is the way to clear up people moving from the southwest corner to the northeast corner of the city of Peterborough, long term.
Are we starting to get to the point, though, where the Parkway is just becoming too expensive to build, combined with the fact that we have an order from the Ministry of the Environment saying that we can't piecemeal the Parkway, and that
the order from the minister isn't specific to the Parkway. That's generalized right across the province. You can't piecemeal projects.
Okay.
What we asked for was relief on the South Link. We have, I believe, unanimous support for the link that goes from Medical Drive down to the Parkway where it is now. That's only common sense. If you go then to the north end of it and go from Cumberland down to Highland, you'll find that there's pretty good response to that one as well, as far as what it will do to alleviate a lot of the cut-through traffic in the north end. The bridge was still the drop-dead point for a lot of people.
You don't think that north end piece is... There used to be big opposition to that. You think that's died down a bit?
When you look at, you've got your NIMBYism going on there, but when you look at the number of calls we get in our office, even to this day, about cut-through traffic in the north end of the city of Peterborough, that solution will alleviate virtually all of them.
Yeah.
And that's a fact.
And there is a real problem with cut-through traffic. I think anyone that's been stuck at Park Hill and Fairbarn can attest to that. That and Goodfellow as well. And
Park Hill and Water and a whole bunch of streets in between that, and we're all guilty of it. We don't like to wait that 2 or 3 stoplights to get through, and the next thing you know, you're firing off, because I can tell you how to get to Trent University 5 different ways or 12 different ways, but none of them appropriately driven because you're off the arterial streets, which puts pressure on the non-arterial streets. They're not built to the same standards as your arterial streets are, and that causes premature failing of some of the roads that should be lasting longer than what they are. So there's a whole myriad of considerations when you look at the overall transportation needs.
Yeah, I know. Like you said, we're all guilty of it. I mean, technically, I should be taking Sherbrooke and Clonsilla to make my way to work, but I cut through residential streets, and I see all the traffic in the morning that does too, and all that causes wear and tear, and then those streets need more maintenance, and then that just adds another bill onto the city.
And safety reasons and all the other things that flow from it,
But I'm just wondering, with the Parkway debate has been going on for so long, are we reaching a point where we're going to be needing both the alternatives to the Parkway and the Parkway itself?
Sure. And over the years, we have done a lot of the alternatives, and a lot of things that people have suggested, quite frankly, have been tried and or have been proposed on paper to see if they'll give us some relief. The timing of the stoplights, the left-hand turns at different intersections with advanced greens and things of that nature.
Are Peterborough stoplights, are they synchronized?
We can synchronize all the lights in the city of Peterborough. There's a few of them that aren't attached, but in most cases we can synchronize.
Okay.
And a lot of them are weight related as well. So if there's a an arterial street with side feeders coming to it. If there's no traffic on those side feeders, the other ones will stay green until somebody shows up, which is a feature that works.
Okay. One of the alternate solutions that I've been hearing a couple of times in this election so far is the idea of a ring road, that instead of the parkway, we need to be building these roads that go around the around that interior traffic so that people can...
I've heard that being talked about by a couple on council that perhaps haven't studied the purposes of ring roads when they were developed back a few decades.
Oh, right. What we're talking about. It's terrible. There's gonna be no flow to this video. Roads. Yes.
Ring roads.
Ring roads.
Ring roads, yes, the concept of ring roads. That's a decades-old proposal that was used in many, many, many communities, but it's one that has run its course. If you want to divide your community or growth within the region, then set up a ring road and try to figure out how you're going to keep people on one side or the other of it. If you think about Peterborough right now, it does have a ring road. It's the road that runs between Springville and Fowler's Corners. Is technically a ring road to get you to and from parts of the city, and I have used it. We go out the bypass and turn right, and you can come back in Park Hill or Lily Lake Road, or you can go on through to Fowler's Corners if you're going to the north end of the city. So that is a ring road. It doesn't get the use that people might think it should, but it does bypass the city.
It's pretty busy though.
I
drive it at least once a week.
Lots of traffic out there. They generally are purposeful. They go from point A to point B on a pretty routine basis. The other one that's been proposed, and that's on the east side of the city, and that's one that we're looking to our government masters once again to give us some indication, and that's the road that'll run from the old Triple T Holdings property there at Burnham Mansion, and cuts through the low-lying area and comes out of the 9th line of Douro up by Trent University.
Oh, okay.
That one has great prospects to replicate basically what TB Road's doing right now. So they assured us they still had an interest in it back a number of years ago, but then they won't commit to telling us what they plan to do with it long term. But they won't give up their hold on the land, so we're assuming that means that they know that it's going to be needed at some point in time. It's just a question of if, as and when they need to spend the money.
Okay, so I think that about covers all the transportation-related questions I had, unless you had any more, Mike.
No.
But maybe we can move on to...
Well, maybe transit, I think.
Yeah, I think that is a question, because there's been talk recently about...
Well, I think part of the transportation issue is people think if the city invested more in transit, that would require fewer cars on the streets.
Sure. And the city has done all the studies on that. As you know, I recuse myself from the discussions pertaining to transit in case I got an extra taxi call out of it or something. But from an operational standpoint, I was in the bus business for 35 years, so I have a pretty good understanding of how that side of it works. And I certainly know the transportation-related part of the business from when we used to run our airline and charter service many years ago. The studies all indicate that that it's very costly to move from our limits on service that we have now to a service that people may use more frequently than they do now. I agree with the studies. They were done by professionals and are very sound. It's the cost factor to the community that needs to be considered, and the overall benefits to that, especially as it relates to the changes in the stylization. It was environmentally motivated at one point in time. With the changes in the type of vehicles that we're going to be driving in the future, that may not be as big a concern as it used to be. There's still a great benefit to having a good, sound transit and, quite frankly, alternate transportation system. We have designed that in our master transportation plan, and it too is paying dividends in many ways for a lot of members of the community. Cars are still the first and foremost choice of transportation, but who knows, when climate change continues to improve the climate in this region, that may start to change more rapidly than we had anticipated.
Okay. Now, active transportation is part of the conversation too. We talked a little bit about it when we were talking about subdivision development. the types of housing development that some people want to see are more reliant on being able to walk and bike to
Walkable walkable communities are very in vogue right now and should be, quite frankly. We think back to my childhood days, and people would walk to the corner store, would walk to the grocery store, would walk to their workplaces in many instances. Those workplaces have changed. A lot of those stores are no longer around, and things sort of evolved from that. Was that progress?
Well, I think we forget too. A lot of Peterborough was built around, like GE.
Around its manufacturing.
Yeah, so then they
sectors,
built up
Outport
neighborhoods
Maine,
around it, so
GE
that
and
you could walk to
the
it,
workers' neighborhoods, right back to the old woolen mills days, and they had cottages set up for the workers to reside in as long as they were in their employ. So, that type of mentality towards workplace activity certainly has changed as well.
Mm-hmm. And I know, in my opinion, I look at the city as cycling network, and there are some noticeable gaps in there. Particularly one gap that I see is there's not really any connection between getting cycling traffic from Autonomy Ward to Town Ward. Clonsilla, the bike lanes don't flow all the way down to Charlotte Street. So how do we go about, or should we go about?
We continue to build as we can and build as opportunities occur, and we've done a great job of adding quite a number of kilometers to the overall trail network within the city. It's very difficult to cut off the flow of vehicles at this point and turn it into a bike lane for two reasons. Number one, it is still not used wholeheartedly in the wintertime when cars are, and we don't have the space on some of the roads that because of the design of them from years ago. So we work that to the best of our abilities as new construction occurs. As you notice what we're doing on George Street South now, that's going to be quite bikeable. The Charlotte Street extension is going to be bikeable. Bethune Street will be bikeable. And the purchase of the different CNR and CPR rail lines are going to give us some benefit long term as well as far as walking and cycling goes.
And street space is also a commodity that needs to be considered as a factor as well, because if you look at Charlotte Street, there's not really room for bike lanes on both sides plus parking. And I think the design that the city chose when it comes to the Charlotte Street redesign reflects the need for parking.
Parking and pedestrians is the focus of that street, and the primary consideration there was that is the east-west corridor to the downtown of the city, and we still have a major employment factor in the form of Quaker Oats in that area that requires trucking traffic going to and from almost hourly if you look at the overall concept of it, but certainly those big rigs are very difficult to maneuver around other than a straight corridor. So that was one of the considerations when we chose to make that a pedestrian walkable area rather than a cycling venue from east to west. King Street will replicate that. People on bicycles don't necessarily mix with traffic as much as they might like to think they can, but the King Street corridor will improve that immensely.
Okay. Moving on from transportation then, we have talked a little bit about housing in terms of subdivisions, but I think the other part of the conversation is intensification of existing areas as well.
Looking very much forward to the charrette activities that occurred and the outcome of that, which is going to come up at our next official plan meeting, which is September the 6th, and that plan will be presented for consideration, and it showed a great deal of intensification within existing neighborhood areas in the community, plus a few areas that aren't built up right now, plus some suggestions as to what might occur with the old GE lands and lands in proximity to that as far as intensification goes. So lots of great people around that table and lots of great ideas with regards to intensification. When you see the stylization of the buildings and see the benefits by way of repurposing of some of the older and less built up areas of the community, there's a great potential there.
There is the concern. Are you concerned, I guess I should ask, are you concerned that as we intensify certain areas, it seems to be the focus is on those of a kind of a middle to higher income level, and that there's going to be fewer and fewer housing opportunities for people
I don't think
in a
that's
lower
necessarily
income?
the case. I think if you look at what Aon did years and years ago with their Charlotte Street project there, that fits a certain need for people within the community, and I see that as still being in vogue today, quite frankly. So there'll be areas that will command higher prices, and there'll be areas that can be repurposed for affordable housing. Affordable housing is one that we took a great interest in, the royal when it was first elected back in 2010. And since that time, I think we've added about 800 units to the affordable housing mix, and that didn't even put a dent in the waiting list.
No, and I guess there's two types of, like, there's affordable housing, the government considered affordable
Standard.
housing. Yeah, and then there's what the average person thinks is affordable housing. Right?
Yeah, and that's always the argument that's out there, or always the discussion that's out there, is at what level does the taxpayers of a community that are struggling to make their own commitments in life, how much burden should we place on them with regards to somebody else's needs? And that's always been the balancing act that goes on with the affordability side of it.
And where do you stand on that balance of weighing the taxpayers' money versus the need for people
taxpayers' dollars and cents in mind at all times is important to me as an individual. I spend their money the same as I would my own, very frugally and very appropriately. Making sure, though, that we can meet our social obligations is something I've taken great pride in, and I think the rest of council has too. We've been very cautious not to, when the provincial government, even with the Liberals doing as good a job as they did in correcting what were seen to be some deficiencies with the previous government, there were still cuts to social programs, and we filled those gaps to the best of our ability without overburdening the taxpayer.
I'm just wondering if you think it's appropriate for the city to, when a developer wants to redevelop or intensify a building and create apartments, for the city to say X number of apartments need to be at this price.
We're not going to dictate pricing points to a developer. We will certainly encourage them to look at ways to make their product as affordable as possible. The provincial guidelines are pretty onerous on some of the mandated responsibilities for the development community. So it's very difficult to take a new development and say, you need to have price points at this level in these houses, because ultimately the taxpayers of the city will end up carrying that burden.
So if we do need low-income housing that's available for people who are in poverty in Peterborough, how do we incentivize developers to build that? We do,
and we have incentives in place right now that assist that. Again, I believe it's within our range of affordability as far as what we can afford to put towards that. We're primarily using it in our SIP program in the downtown corridor, and we're looking at extending that beyond the downtown area to pick up some of the slack that's on a few other streets that are quite developable.
Do you think this is an issue really where the federal and provincial governments need to get involved in?
You've touched on it dead on. The federal government has had a shortcoming for as long as I am old in not coming up with a housing strategy for this country.
Oh yeah, I think it's been since Chrétien was Prime Minister. Right?
Putting the blame on them. I'm just saying you've spent a lot of money on a lot of other projects. You failed to pick up one very basic ingredient, and that's it.
Yeah.
So do we come up with our own solutions then, or do we start lobbying the federal government to get more involved?
We have been, over the years, we've always maintained a presence with the feds and with the province as far as that goes, and what they can do to assist with housing. They are fully aware of what they need to do. It's a question, it's not glorious to spend that type of money. Where it is glorious to spend money is another program. So I think that they, at some point in time, will perhaps refocus their attention to what's going on within the municipalities rather than the rest of the world, per se.
All right. I think that answers all my questions. Did you have any more, Mike?
No.
All right. Is there anything else
Very
that
good.
you want to add?
Oh, actually, I did want to touch on one other area because it's been in the news lately, but needles that people are finding all around the city. There's a growing concern among many people that it's not the parks and certain areas are safe for the
one individual in particular and a couple of others that have raised that as a concern, and it is a concern to all of us. And what are we doing as a community to assist with that? We are working diligently to patrol the areas where we know needles have been found. We have our public works people alerted to that, and they go back to those areas regularly to make sure that we're picking up whatever's there.
And they're pretty quick at it too,
They're very good at it. The big difficulty, I got accused of placing the blame on other governments, where in fact we should take the blame ourselves. Well, we have a drug problem in North America. It's not just the city of Peterborough, it's not the city of Toronto, it's right across North America. and nobody has come up with a solution yet to try to fix the problem. We're looking at Band-Aids, and that's something that we are meeting regularly with our provincial masters and suggesting that they can give us some help. We need some stronger laws to deal with the people who are supplying drugs illegally in this country, and we need to start working our way through correcting that as the base of the problem, and then getting the education program and the healthcare system involved to see if we can get people off drugs.
And I've also heard from some people, some advocates of safe injection sites, that those places are, they have the possibility of reducing the number of needles that are out in the wild, as well as the solution of more deposit boxes for sharp needles. What do you think of those solutions?
Again, that's part of the solution process, is to come up with as many devices as we can to eliminate the problem. The problem is they're discarding needles here, there, and all over. There are a fair number of sites. Every pharmacy will accept needles. There's a number of other areas that assist with that. You know, the safe injection side of it was something we spoke about. Chief Rod and I actually attended one of the meetings up at the health unit. And, you know, regardless of what your feelings are towards the benefits or negative effects of having drug houses legalized, is what some people were saying. If it saves one life, then why wouldn't you be in favor of it? And that's what the bottom line is.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Great to have me.
Is there anything else that you want to add before we...
No, you've done a great job of covering most of the local issues, and I'll look forward to continuing debate.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right, to everybody else, we will see you next week.